Kucha is not here yet.
If we start, I start the recording also.
Recording in progress.
All right, hello people, and welcome to this scientific session that I'm chairing. Basically, my role as chair, I think, is to get out of the way as soon as I can to give the different presenters the time they need to present their material. But I would quickly like to introduce Huong. Huong is a bachelor's student of mine who came to me a number of months ago saying that she wanted to do research. And she has facilitated my mental health by taking on the task of analyzing a data set that we have been in the process of collecting for some time. So I find it very courageous. Huong, I think you're the youngest participant in this conference. Yeah, please help me in welcoming Huong to present on the correlates of research in mental health.
Yes. Hello, everyone. How are you all doing since this is the last day of the conference? I hope everyone gets their energy back after the coffee break. Let's get us all started. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Huong. I'm a student at the University of Amsterdam, and now I'm here with Stefan, my supervisor. We're also doing this research with Sophia and Jana. For this talk, we'll focus on the correlates of researcher mental health and exploratory study. This is our first time presenting this data, and our goal is to produce a peer-reviewed manuscript submission after this, and I would appreciate all the feedback for this. And I think you can use. Oh. So as researchers, you probably already know this job is very stressful, especially when deadlines are coming. On this topic, we want to study, and so we break down different factors, sent out a survey to over 17 members of MCAA last year, and then we analyze the data. While previous literature tends to focus more on work environments variables, we want to broaden the study by exploring other aspects such as academic productivity, perceived career success, career stage, organizational rank, and family characteristics. We'll also compare the difference between academia and the people who already left academia. And I think this is the unique point of our data sets. And due to restriction of range, we believe that the people who exited academia might have left because they were on the edge of burnout, and in reality, it might have been much worse than what we are observing in surveys. For the data collection, even though we sent out the survey to 17,000 members, we only received 1,185 responses from the alumni. Then we matched with over 600 research profiles using the ORCID. We think that for future research, it might be useful to minimize the restriction of range again, because there might be differences between the people who voluntarily gave their ORCID and who did not. About the demographics of the respondents, half of them are female and almost half of them are male. And about marital status, also half of them are married, 27% are single, and 37% in a relationship. Maybe you can. I think I touched something. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, while you troubleshoot the tech, I was curious how the survey was framed. Like, what was the title of the survey in this case, and what?
I don't remember.
Okay, the survey was a general survey of the Mike Alumni Association's membership, and I think it was broadly framed, and it contained all sorts of questions.
Okay,
on
so it
topics.
wasn't like specifically.
Yeah, it wasn't about like researchers' mental health, but we have different variables, and we also have variables on how often do you attend and like receive the MSCA newsletters and
And open science, the Green Deal, and so it was
Yeah.
all over the place.
Yes, thank you. We also have a pretty international data set with respondents coming from over 70 countries of residence and over 80 nationalities. And they also have different work of lines, ranging from research assistant, PhD student to researchers. Some of them decided not to disclose their work of lines, and some have already moved on in their non-academic world, such as they take their senior manager job. Roughly 16% of the respondents indicated they already left academia, and about 80% are still active. Our survey design, we sent out the online survey to the participants using Likert scale questions around the variables that related to mental health. We were testing 14 contextual and personal variables using validated scales from previous literature. Here's an example of an item for perceived career success, in which we asked them from 1 to 5 how satisfied they are with the goal progress. About the analysis, we ran correlations with 3 different levels, starting from contextual, personal, and then the academic productivity variables. Starting from contextual variables, we identified that barriers from work environment has the strongest correlation with the mental well-being, followed by goal rationale and supervisor supports. An example from the goal rationale, an example item of the construct goal rationale might be the goal explained by my supervisor is well rationalized and I understand it clearly. And about the health dimension, we also divided into 2 aspects, the mental well-being and mental illness. Also frame that anxiety and depression. As for personal variables, we found out that perceived career success is the most important factor. So basically, if you think you're successful, you enjoy better mental health. And while networking and career planning might result in better mental health for researchers, it might not really help that much if they're struggling with depression. And for academic and productivity variables, we found there's a weak negative correlation between academic and well-being. This variable tested whether someone is in academia or whether they're ex-academia. We also found a negative correlation between reviews and anxiety and depression, which we find quite insightful, because in one way, it might be because the people who volunteer to write reviews might find the meaningfulness from doing this, so the more they write, the better they feel about their career. But on the other hand, it might just as well be the people who are depressed just stop writing reviews. Yeah.
So people with anxiety and depression tend to be less likely to write reviews.
Yeah. After running the correlation, we ran the regression and tried to find out how much variance of mental well-being that we can explain from the variables that we had. moving from the first two models of the work environments and personal issues related variables, they are the most common ones in previous literature, to the more experimental variables such as academia or not and academic productivity. We found that using the R-squared difference, personal issues had the most explanatory power to predicting mental health, followed by work environments. Whether someone is academia or not also help to predict their mental health, even though it's not that significant of only 1.1%. Disappointingly, we found that the academic productivity in this model was not significant in predicting mental health. But then we also tried to zoom in the difference between people who were in academia and people who are in academia right now using comparing means. We found that the people who already left enjoyed slightly better mental well-being and slightly less anxiety and depression compared to those who are still active. They also seem to be more active in networking and career planning. However, the people in academia still indicate higher perceived career success. And a bit about the correlations when we divide the data between academia and ex-academia. We found that people in academia have a positive correlation between articles and books published with well-being. So this might explain the phenomenon of publish or perish. So the less papers and the less books that you publish, you might have suffered from worse mental health. Then an interesting point is the one who left academia seems to have negative correlation between books, grants received, and their mental well-being. So it seems that the people who were accomplished when they were in academia seems to suffer worse mental health now that they left. Just to summarize our findings so far, first, we found that personal variables can predict better than contextual variables through our regression analysis. Secondly, ex-academia generally suffers less mental health issues than academia. Well, good for them. And thirdly, even though academic productivity is insignificant in predicting mental health, we did observe some interesting trends around that, starting from the phenomenon of publish or perish, as I just explained. Yeah, and also the more reviews written, the less anxiety and depression. We might have several implications for this research, starting from it will give useful insights to analyze the REMO survey. As Devin already explained, I think the REMO survey has the bigger scale, but pretty much similar construct design as this survey. And for practical implications, since personal variables can explain better the mental health of researchers, policies should be customized based on personal backgrounds and not just focusing on the contextual. For future directions, future research should address limitations on the restriction of range and the unclear causal directions of the interpretations that we just made. And they might also consider dissecting by country and institution. And that's also the end of my presentation today. Thank you for your attention, and we are all ears for any comments or questions. Yes, please.
So thank you. Very interesting study. I'd like to ask if there are any data on the reasons for leaving academia.
We actually have questions on whether you left academia or not, and is the reason why you're not in academia now is because you wanted to and not being forced, but we didn't have any open-ended questions on why they left academia. And I think another limitation of us is we also didn't know when they left academia.
All right, yeah, because I think I might have left academia. I might have, it's like, well, I don't know, because I'm changing my relationship with academia. I run my own company now. Although I do research, I collaborate with universities. So I don't know whether it's, I think it's a very, what I mean is it's a very complicated.
Yeah, it's very complicated definition.
Yeah, and yeah, I look forward to if there will be qualitative studies as well. I will volunteer as a participant. Yeah,
Definitely gonna be very interesting.
yeah,
Like,
yes.
what am I leaving academia or still in academia?
Yeah.
Or you're just a hybrid career.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
When I looked on YouTube, I found a lot of videos about why I left academia, and I found actually like
Yeah.
20 plus videos on that.
Even on Twitter,
Yeah.
people post a lot of long messages about why
Yeah.
they leave academia.
Yeah, it's all about leaving academia.
Twitter is a long, so
Yeah.
Twitter scraping would be very.
But Twitter, you have to follow the thread, but on LinkedIn, they post like a huge post. They can write in a single go.
Yeah, Christina.
So you did phenomenally. You presented very well, and you had a bunch of great ideas the last 2 days. So I want to say you've done phenomenal. I'm very impressed.
Oh, thank you so much.
So I want to say that first and foremost. For my question, what I'm really curious about, if you go back to the graph that compares the academic to non-academic,
Yes, this one.
there isn't, at least in the graph, it doesn't seem to be a huge difference in well-being and mental health and anxiety and depression. So I'm curious how significant that difference is. And then I'm also curious if you tried stratifying the data based on, for example, non-academia, but still in a research career versus perhaps a non-research position. Because the reason I'm thinking about this is because, especially in communities like the Dropout Club and that sort of thing, a lot of people say, oh, my mental health is so much better now that I left academia. So there's kind of this impression that when you leave, it gets so much better. But it doesn't seem to be a huge difference here.
Well, because if you see the sample size, I think that might be one of the reasons.
Yeah.
That's very different. 141 and 735.
Yeah.
So unless you apply a correlation coefficient, it's not ideal. Huge difference.
So I'm just kind of curious if you looked within like different subcategories.
Yeah, I think I actually did dive into that a bit, but then I found we have pretty small samples. If we divide per profession, for
Yeah.
example, even for academia, I found we only have around like 40 or 20 something of professorships. And that's too small for running analysis, even though I would love to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just following up a little bit on that. I mean, your sample is also like an elite academic sample, right? I mean, Marie Curie is not something that everybody has, and you somehow also see that. I think it's reflected also in the fact that people who have better performed in academia have and then left have lower mental health, so they really consider them as academics, so they might not be that happy being out because they thought they were on the elite track. So that was one comment on that, but I also had a question. Your personal variables, you said the personal variables predict more. What personal variables are that? And
Yes. So we have perceived career success, networking, and career planning. They are all each of them is like a separate variable with one scale only, but for barriers from personal issues, it's actually combined by, I think, 6 or 7 scales from the Swanson study on career barriers. And some, I don't remember all of them, but I do remember the highlights were, for example, uncertainty about their job, need to relocate, and feeling overqualified for work. So it
So
basically,
then that might actually correlate strongly with your structural variables and somehow explain why the structural variables don't explain so much. Did you test for that? Like, whether this is intercorrelated?
yes, so the reason why I combined those two, basically from the survey, we have around like 21, 22 different carrier barriers. And then I combined them, I categorized them into barriers from work environments, barriers due to discrimination, and barriers from personal issues. And I used PCA and I also tested scale reliability, and it comes out over 0.8. So I think that was pretty legit. Yeah. But I also still think that there's a chance that some individual barriers from the personal issues also correlates with barriers from work environments.
Yeah, so you're suggesting we should look for multicollinearity or something.
Yeah.
So these things are being entered in different hierarchical steps. I don't know whether that solves it, because this is the personal barriers go before anything else, basically, right? If you go back to the regress.
Oh, I actually put the perceived career.
No, like the table with the R square.
Oh, yeah. The work environments, for
Oh,
example. Because I found the work environments most commonly studied in previous institute.
It's a good question. We can think about it.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you for your beautiful presentation. Well done. I have a question about the productivity measures, because you distinguish articles, book grants, and reviews. Did you use ORCID for that, or how do you receive the information about that academic variable?
Yes, so from the original survey, I think we have one question about, can you give us your ORCID? And only 600 of them volunteered to give them. And then we use the ORCID to scrape data, and we have those performance indicated. There's also like number of conference and awards, but I think those 4 are the most important: articles, books, grants, and reviews. Also because the first 3 indicated how accomplished you are in academia, and the last one more like free time, and if you want to contribute more, you would volunteer to do reviews. So that's also some very interesting.
And your respondents also included that in their ORCID IDs, the number of reviews that are influencing.
I think it's scraped automatically from like Publons or the where nowadays you can actually get credit for your anonymous reviews. I think that's the source of those data. And did you end up going back 3 years for the performance data, or
yes.
the entire career?
This one I only calculated in the last 3 years, so from 2020 to 2022, because that's the time we sent out the survey. And but for this one, for example, I used the all time, because the people who exited academia, I wouldn't know when they exited, and I found when I tried to combine the last 3 years, I found like 90% of them only have like 0 articles, 0 books, 0 grants. There's not.
Yeah, and we also have information about the disciplines or the research field, because we know that publishing an article in STEM, that includes lots of authors instead of social science and humanities in general. So we expect more articles from people working in STEM fields compared to SSH.
Oh yeah, we actually also have that information, but we didn't utilize much. But that's definitely for follow-up. Yeah. Thank you.
So in the books, grants, and publications, did you pick the first author or the final author?
I'm not so sure about that.
Because if you're
I think
writing,
any type of authorship is counted. So
like the first author would be more stressed than the third author.
maybe
I would
just-
say.
yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
But then is there a way we would know?
We probably have to hand score.
Yeah.
And sorry, another thing, in this list, you have correlation coefficient, but the sample size is quite different, as I mentioned before. So did you add a correction factor to equate the two to like academia and ex-academia? Or this is just a direct?
I think I only did it correctly, but
Maybe if you add the correction factor, these results would be quite different.
You mean on the significance level? Or?
Yeah, I mean, if you just sort of divide them and multiply one with the other, or divide the other one with the same factor, they would equate, they would be same. Right now they're this, but if they are at the same level, then the results that you showed in the next slide, or even this correlation coefficient, will be very, very different.
You mean weighted?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
no
weight-
weighted, yeah, weighted sum of means.
No, it's usually you just need a correction factor to make 67 as 431 or
right,
431 as
yeah,
67.
so it's like, yeah. So
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I didn't think of that.
Hey, I'm just
Yes, thank you.
So you mentioned that there was also some data on like conferences and such. Did you look at that at all, or did you just leave it out?
I looked at that, but then I calculated and see that is the correlation or not significant, and also I can't really tell any stories behind that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the one thing I would be curious about in terms of thinking about how some of these factors might be interrelated, things like conference presentations and being asked for reviews can reflect on how well integrated you are into your research community. And then that could perhaps also influence some of these other factors of
yeah.
well-being.
For
Because if you
example,
feel like you're
networking.
if you feel like you're integrated and you're part of it, that would be very different than if you feel like you don't fit into the research community and into your professional community.
Yeah,
So-
that's would be great to
Mhm.
dive into.
Great, I'm afraid we're going, I'm going to have to cut this discussion short, because we have a different presentation. Next up is a presentation by Nili Losmanova on the formal onboarding of doctoral candidates. So Nili, if you can share your screen, we'll get you set up here.
Yeah, can you see it properly? I hope so.
We're nearly there. So we're just maximizing the screen size.
Yeah, can you see it properly?
Almost. Give us 1 second.
Then it's going to be here. No, it's the other.
The meeting
Can you make it the full screen, please?
maybe you can press F5 on your keyboard, which will serve to.
Yeah, I'm sharing it here, so I hope you.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying to because right now we're seeing the editing view of PowerPoint, but